Smallpox, 430 BC, 1529, 1633, and 1901. Origin point was in Athens, Greece. This epidemic wiped out more than 20 million people total. The Plague of Justinia, 541 AD in 1519. Origin point was in Middle East and Asia. 50 million people were wiped out, plus 90% of the Aztec Empire was killed because of this outbreak. Yellow fever, 1793. Origin point was in Philadelphia. 1/10 of the city's population, equating to 4,500, was eradicated from this disease. Not all deaths were documented during this tragedy, so scientists do not know really how many people died. The Great Flu Pandemic, 1918 to 1919. 30 to 50 million people worldwide were affected. 675,000 were American citizens. What do all these different pandemics have in common? All these ailments have the power to bring any civilization to its knees. Every civilization known to man all has one thing in common. They rise, they conquer, and thrive, and they topple. One disease, however, almost brought our great nation to its lowest point: polio. In the 1950s, a crushing number of children by the thousands were infected with a mysterious disease diagnosed as polio. Its effects crippled young children and brought a new wave of terror to the country. Even scientists before the cure alleged it to be uncurable and untouchable. But famous virologist Jonas Salk found a way to combat this disease. In the 1950s, large numbers of children and adults were plagued with a mysterious virus called polio. Its effects crippled young children and brought fear, paralyzation, and misery to all it infected. It was the National Foundation for Infantile Paralysis that approached Salk based on his successful work with influenza to take on the lead in developing a vaccine. In the 1950s, about 25% of the paralytic cases occurred in people 21 years of age and older. In fact, Franklin Roosevelt, who was president of our United States, was paralyzed at the age of 39. And so, at that time, the age distribution had changed. It was a disease that was spread less by water supply or by exposure to fecal contamination. It was spread now more by playmates, the secretions of the nose and throat. Once the virus would enter the body by exposure to another polio victim, it would multiply in the intestines, enter the bloodstream, and then it would begin attacking the nervous system and eat away at the spinal cord, causing the victim to be paralyzed. The virus would spread that way in schools and among playmates. As far as the incidence in the early 1950s, in the 5 years leading up to the introduction of a vaccine in 1955, there are approximately 25,000 new cases reported yearly, and the highest ever recorded was in 1953, with over 50,000 cases. These statistics show the great epidemic's growth, since polio would crop up anywhere at any time without any warning. Many kids and adults alike succumb to this disease, like the patient hooked up to the breathing tube called an iron lung as depicted here. Polio was crippling our nation, literally and figuratively. Our country needed a cure, and fast. During the early 1910s and 1920s, anti-Semitism had begun to become an issue for both Americans and Jews. Anti-Semitism was when people showed hostility or prejudice against Jews, such as the KKK, and in some cases, Father Coughlin. The immigration influx of the Jewish refugees had begun overpowering the United States. Jewish immigrants had come from Eastern Europe, and the sudden overflow had caused many businesses to collapse or be overrun by Jewish workers. Jonas Salk's parents were immigrants from Poland, and because of their Jewish background, they faced financial and exclusion from American citizens. The Salk family did not have the luxury of being able to have a formal education. Jonas Salk's mother only had an elementary education, and his father wasn't able to finish high school. Salk was one of his many siblings to get to a higher level of college. Salk graduated from Townsend Harris High School, a school for gifted students as himself. He left at the top of his class to study law at the College of the City of New York. After pursuing law, he decided to switch to a hardier, more needed subject, medicinal science. Thus became Salk's career as a virologist. While at New York University, Salk was invited to spend a year researching influenza, the virus that causes flu. It had just recently been discovered, and Salk was fixated by the thought of whether the virus could be deprived of its ability to infect while still giving immunity to the illness. Salk's employment led him to an appointment at the University of Pittsburgh Medical School in 1947, where he again was faced with another epidemic on the rise, polio. Salk was barely included on the list of scientists to work on a cure for polio from Roosevelt, who recognized him later on with a citation for eradicating polio. Jonas Salk was a major help and hero to the world of medicine, although his fellow peers did not think so at the time. Many educated scientists thought that Salk was undereducated and wasn't smart enough to create a cure for something so poignant, also because of his faith and background. After 8 years of painstaking research, there was finally a product to be tested on humans. In 1955, human trials began, and it was almost immediate as effective. Within the vaccine, it contained a dead virus of the virus portion to kill off the virus, but again activated the patient's immune system in order to defend itself, but not reinfecting the person. In later development by another researcher other than Salk, a few years later, a live polio virus was included in the vaccine that proved even further effective, but was later discovered that it actually infected well patients with the virus, and then people were stricken with the effects. Salk's form of the dead virus was ruled as prudent or careful method in which to inoculate against the disease is still in use today. When the news of the vaccine discovery was announced to the public on April 10, 1955, Salk was hailed as a miracle worker. It cannot be said that one man conquered a virus, but it was this victory by developing the field of biomedical research that faced it head-on and won. So Carl Sagan had said of modern medicine, advances in medicine and agriculture have saved vastly more lives than have been lost in all the wars in history. It is through these lifelong accomplishments of Jonas Salk that proves these words to be true.